everybody. Welcome back to the Restaurants Canada Show 2023, Heart and Hustle. So excited to have Adam Vassos here for our next interview. I had the pleasure of meeting Adam several years ago, and I think he is simply one of the most influential people in the hospitality industry, along with others in the country of Canada and beyond. Somebody I deeply respect, and I learn from every opportunity I've had to hear him speak. But I wanted to do a proper introduction to Adam. So here, we're happy to welcome Adam Vassos to our show today. Adam is a lawyer who we have known for many years. Adam has worked with the entire industry and is recognized as the preeminent lawyer for the food and beverage industry. He has literally written the book on liquor licensing law in Canada. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here and to see you.
Thanks so much. And I'm excited because you got a new show coming up with Mr. Jay Ashton on the SVK network called Legal Bites. So tell me a little bit more about Legal Bites and what you're going to bring to the audience.
Legal Bites is an amazing and exciting opportunity for us to bring information to the industry in real time and disseminate information to people all at once. It's going to be about a little bit about entertainment, partly about information, partly about education, but basically anything to do with food and beverage and the law as seen through the eyes of a lawyer who's been in the industry for over 30 years.
Awesome. And what are some of the things that might make it on right now? If we look at, if there was a show happening today, this is the first kind of test side of Legal Bites. What's something happening in the industry right now that you'd want to bring forward, make sure people are aware of, or a trend or a change? I know you got lots, but something you can share with us that capture the audience.
You're right. There is a lot of information, and it's
something we
constantly.
talked about before this. We're not going to bring onto the show, but let's hear a little bit more.
So recently, we've had the legalization of cannabis, and that's really rocked the industry, both on the cannabis side, but also on the food and beverage side. So the questions that are coming around and many people are having today is, how does the legalization of cannabis affect food and beverage? So for many people who own restaurants, bars, and nightclubs, they let their staff go out for a cigarette break. What happens now if your staff wants to go out and instead of smoking a cigarette, they want to smoke a joint? Is that permissible? What is the liability if you allow it? Can you have a policy that says, no, you can't do this? Similarly, with cannabis as well, you have the issue of your customers now. So they come into your restaurant or your bar, and let's say they bring in a cookie, an infused gummy. Can they take that at your restaurant? If you have a policy, can you say, no, you cannot do that? Restrict them from taking cannabis products. If you allow them to do it, what is your liability? What are your responsibilities to ensure that these patrons leave safely and consume responsibly? So these are the types of issues that we'll be looking at, just part of them. And they're pressing, they're ongoing, and they're important to the industry as a whole.
Would you mind, just out of curiosity from my side, is what are some of the answers, like from a, like can staff consume, can guests consume? I know it's a big question, and I'm sure there's lots of scenarios, but just in general terms from your counsel or insight, you know, what would you advise an operator, because it is such an active topic?
You're absolutely right. It's an active topic. It's extremely important. And what I'm going to say about it is tune into our first show and you'll learn all about it. We'll talk to you about everything. I think what you have to realize too is we can't provide legal advice over the air. So what you're going to get is our experience and our knowledge and our discussions of existing legislation, regulations, and that sort of thing. So we'll be able to give you a great understanding of what you have to be concerned about and what your options are.
And one thing I deeply respect about you and those that you surround yourself with, when we look to how influential you are in the liquor licensing space, but also that you were first at helping guide the industry. Like, I had you at one of my workshops back in 2018, speaking to restaurant operators about the impacts of cannabis, but just how out front you are of it, not just as an opportunity, but to support the industry with the right advice. And I do appreciate you can't share directly with counsel, so wrong question, but I'm looking forward to tuning into the show. But Adam, give us some examples of what you mean by information and the law that you shared on upcoming podcasts.
Yeah, so for example, the cannabis issue is one issue that is, I think, extremely important, and that's the kind of information we'll be sharing. Recently, we've seen changes in terms of how various provinces enact liquor license regulations and make changes to their liquor license regulations. So, for example, recently Ontario has basically said, if you want to extend your patio on a temporary basis for the summer, we're not going to get involved. Before you had to apply, you had to get an application to extend your patio. It was an alterations application or an increase in capacity application. You had to go out and get architects to do drawings. You had to get fire, building, and health in to give you clearance letters. The AGCO, as of last year, said, we're not doing that anymore. If you want to extend your patio on a temporary basis, we're going to stay out of it. Go ahead and do it. Just get a letter of approval from the city. And that's the kind of information that in the past, the only way we could disseminate that information to our clients was through emails. Through Legal Bites now, we'll be able to pass that information on to you on a real-time basis.
And I just think it's so critical just for the audience and for us, this podcast launches, to know this information and how quickly things change. But just hearing that alone and thinking how many of my clients have closed patios because of the roadblocks. When the sun is out, as it is today here in Toronto, and they lost critical revenue that we can't afford to lose anymore. So
absolutely.
It's critical to know. So Adam, with respect to the changes to legislation affecting restaurants and bars, what can we expect?
So since COVID, we've seen a willingness on the part of government to enact changes to the legislation to help businesses do better, to help them make more money. One thing that we're seeing is a consideration of extension of hours for service of alcohol, which is huge. Our program will be able to give you real-time notice of changes that are either happening or about to happen in any jurisdiction. So, for example, if Alberta is thinking of changing their laws to allow service of alcohol till 4 a.m., we'll be able to tell you that. The idea is to give the restaurant, bar, and hotel owners the tools that they need to succeed. If you have a chef and he doesn't have the kitchen equipment that he needs to prepare his meals, you're not providing him with the tools he needs for success. Similarly, for an owner, knowledge and information are his tools, or her tools, their tools. And it's extremely important to have your information in terms of what's changing, what's happening, what's upcoming at your fingertips, so that you can make decisions based on staffing, based on extensions, based on equipment. It doesn't, it's never ending.
And I'm just thinking how many times before where there would be changes and how slow the communication to the industry was, where certain operators interpreted it differently or weren't aware, or, like I said, looking provincially rather than nationally. What might be coming down the pipe. So
absolutely, and so many of our clients are international, or at least they're national across Canada. They have stores or restaurants, they have casinos, and they're in Ontario, they're in Quebec, they're in Alberta, and for these individuals and these business owners, it's extremely important for them to have access to information, just as important as it is for someone who has one store, one location. We hope that Legal Bites will be able to provide every listener with the tools and the knowledge they need to be able to operate their business, not only in compliance with the laws, but also to have an understanding of what's coming down the pipe so that they can prepare for it adequately and be proactive.
What I love, and this is a bit off script, but I'm really excited about this conversation, just because how we can get this information, not just in an email way, but in a visual way, in a way that we can consume it and understand it, have a conversation with it. How does it impact our operation? It's absolutely critical, and it's just amazing. There's not a source of this information anywhere else right now in our industry, is there?
Yeah, and I'm surprised that it's taken so long. I mean, I think that's the beauty of SVK. It allows an opportunity for realistically programmed entertainment, information, and education to come to market. And it fills a need, and it provides a niche entertainment opportunity for people to tune in and learn about their industry, because that's never existed before. You can never go to a channel and find out what's happening in your industry. This is going to be quite interesting and quite exciting.
I can't wait to watch. Well, I'm up to date myself, but to also share, because there's so many people out there I know that want and need this information. And I'm not BSing here on SVK. They say, well, we need, I genuinely mean this, because there's been so many times I've seen operators lose opportunity by not having access. And I don't think there's anybody in our industry, no matter what side, if we're talking about the alcohol licensing side, the hospitality industry, or the cannabis impact on our industry, there's nobody who has the access that you have. in the
Thank
time
you.
that you have. You're not here to pump your tires. You don't need it, as I know, because your reputation stands above. But what I want to know is Jay Ashton is here. He's somewhere at the show.
Hey, Jay. Shout out to Jay.
Jay Ashton, again, one of the biggest influencers in our industry, a dear friend of mine, wherever he is in the world of Restaurants Canada right now. What I'd like to do is talk about the format of the show.
Yeah.
I think that's what really engages the audience.
I think format's important, and we have to adapt and be able to provide to the listener what they're looking for. So the format, as we envision it now, will be the provision of the information, the entertainment, and the education. And then we'll bring on speakers who will be able to provide us with their knowledge and expertise in the industry. And on top of that, we're going to have a Q&A. So our listeners can write to us in advance of the show, provide us with any questions they may have, and we'll be able to answer those at the end of the show, or even during the live portion of the program, they'll be able to email us with questions that they may have, and we'll get to them and try and answer them to the best of our abilities.
And I think that's what Jay's done so brilliantly with the SVK network, is it's not about the shows, it's about the community. And once we have the community, we can have trust to ask the questions. Because there's a lot of shows out there. The podcast space is crowded, but then there's shows that are taking an approach like this that's creating a community and a conversation, which is what we really need. And I just encourage those out there, there's no wrong questions. How do you bring your question to the forefront? How do you be a bit more selfish? The more selfish we are and what we're experiencing, the better results we'll see, or we'll get faster access to the information we need. But Adam, one last question before we get into kind of some open conversation about the industry is, can you give us some examples of how the sharing of information has helped solve problems for the industry?
That's a great question, and thanks for asking that, Matt. Legal Bites is really about that. It's about the sharing of information so that people aren't reinventing the wheel all over again. And unfortunately, in our industry in the past, it's been like that. Each jurisdiction is sort of going through its own trials and errors as it develops and it comes to fruition. In terms of examples, I'll give you a couple of examples that I found were extremely impactful in my career and in my life. I was in Melbourne, Australia several years ago, and I was in a line to get into a bar. It was one of the most popular nightclubs in Melbourne. And as I got to the front of the line, there was about 6 or 7 police officers, and they were in this heated discussion, almost argument with the owner of the establishment. And it was all about overcrowding, capacity issues, right? And the police were saying they're overcrowded. The owner was saying they weren't overcrowded. And the idea of the police at that time was to let's empty the club and count the people coming out, which, as you know, is a disaster. First of all, you're creating safety and security issues, fire issues, right? But also you're destroying the nightclub. It's like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. It's just getting going. If you empty everybody out, they're not going back in. So I stepped forward, and I couldn't help myself. I sort of walked to the front. And I said, "Excuse me," and they all kind of looked at me. And I said, "I think I may have a solution here." And they, the police were not too happy to hear from me, but the owner said, "Well, what's your solution?" And I said, "What if tomorrow we got counters for all the staff at the front? And one staff would be responsible for an in count, and one staff member would be responsible for an out count. So that any time we could ask what the capacity is, and we'd be able to take the in count, subtract the out count unit. 1,200 in, 200 out, there's 1,000 people in the club. That'll help the police to ensure that the premises are complying with their legal capacity, but it also helps the establishment know at any given time how many people are in their establishment." So the police said, "Yeah, that's a really good idea." And the owner said, "I could do that." So the police left, and I went back in line, and the owner came and he goes, "Do you mind coming in for a minute?" I said, "Sure." So we sat down at his table, which was great because we sat down at the table and had 3 drinks all night.
Nice.
But more importantly, he goes to me, what do you do? Why is it that you came up with a solution like this? And I said, "Because we've had these similar problems in Canada. And that's how we resolve the problem in Canada, is to come up with a solution to a problem that exists and find a way to resolve the problem to ensure that you're not disrupting your business, but that you're also maintaining safety and security," right? Another example we had very recently was with suspensions and monetary fines. So for years, I represented bars and restaurants and nightclubs in Toronto. And every time they had an intoxicated patron, they would get a 7 to 10 day suspension. And a 7 to 10 day suspension can literally kill. It's like a death sentence.
Be all the profits for a year for some.
Absolutely. And it's not easy to. So what happens? You're closed for 2 weekends on a 10-day suspension. those patrons are going to go to a different place. They're going to go to a different restaurant or a different bar or a different nightclub, and you may never see them again. So that intended 10-day suspension to cover your infraction of permitting either an intoxicated patron or overcrowding in your establishment really ends up costing you your business at the most, and at the very least, it's going to cost you months and months of profits. So I had been bugging the Alcohol and Gaming Commission for years to implement fines.
Not too many people can do that. Maybe not the opportunity to be heard in that space, but that is one of them.
Yeah, and they kept saying there's no policy, there's no procedures for fines. So I just accepted that. I said, okay, we'll keep working towards it. And then one day, a client of mine from Ontario who has businesses in Alberta called me up and said, hey, we had a situation in Alberta. There was some patrons who got a little bit, had too much to drink, got into a fight, and someone got hurt. And now we're facing disciplinary proceedings and potential sanctions from the Alberta Gaming Commission. Can you consult? I said, absolutely. So I went out there to meet with their team and with their lawyers and help them consult. And we ended up meeting with the Alberta Gaming Commission. I think it's called the ALGC. So we had a long chat. We talked about what our client was doing to ensure this never happened again. Tried to show that this was really a unique situation that just couldn't have been prevented. It wasn't something that you could plan for or anything else. And despite the unfortunate circumstances, that measures and policies were in place to ensure that we're protected from this kind of thing happening in the future. So they looked at me, and they're all wearing their cowboy boots. It's a really different experience when you're out in when you're out in Edmonton. It's a completely different experience. So they said to me, you know what? We agree that your clients are great operators and that this was an unusual situation and couldn't have been prevented. How's $2,500? And I said, $2,500 what? Like I was thinking, like $2,500 day suspension. Are you kidding me? Yeah. And they go, no, $2,500. And I said, you have monetary penalties? And they said, yeah, we've had them for years. So I said, look, I'll speak to the client, and I'm sure he'll accept that. But in the interim, would you mind giving me what you've got, like how this works? He gave it to me. The client accepted the deal. I got back on the plane. I flew to Toronto, went straight to the offices of the senior counsel at the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, and just dropped the paperwork on his desk. And I go, here it is. 6 months later, Ontario had monetary penalties instead of just the only option of a suspension or a revocation. And as a result of that, I have to be honest with you, since that, and it's been several years now, I don't think I've seen an establishment get a suspension. And a monetary fine can be designed to be tantamount or equivalent to the penalty. So for example, let's say you're charged with overcrowding, and you make $50 a person for every person that's in your establishment. So if you're overcrowded by 10 people, you know what your profit is. Your profit's $500. So if you want to add a deterrent effect to that, you can say the penalty is going to be double that. So the penalty is going to be $1,000 for this particular overcrowding. So that provides a deterrent to the establishment. They're not going to want to do it again because they realize they're not going to make money by overcrowding, because if they get caught, it's going to cost them twice what they spent. But you're not shutting the business down for any period of time. You're not taking away their opportunity to stay business and to stay competitive. So the imposition of monetary penalties in Ontario has been hugely impactful and a positive measure for the industry.
And I hope those that are listening to this as they watch it live or as we continue to share the episode, I went out, and we've got a fairly diverse client base and working in the industry for 25 years. Every single person I asked about Adam and his firm and his team was either working with him or had worked with him. And that's the one thing that just shocked me, is I've never heard somebody in such a big space in supporting or not licensing, but in support if there was a challenge, of just the reputation of the solution. When it wasn't how do we work on the problem or how do we fix and then repeat again with another client, it's that absolute drive and the want to find a permanent solution that's best for the industry as a whole. And that I deeply respect, because you just don't see it. And I think it's somebody that you are somebody that we all have the opportunity to learn from, listen to and learn from, so we can act in a fair environment. And the fight that you put on, if it wasn't for you, where would we be, right? If we didn't take, I'm sure the flight cost more than $2,500 fine, which the client might have put you on, but to drop that letter and think about how many people you've supported and millions of dollars of revenue in those years. That's your drive. And again, I'm not here to pump your tires, but here that there are certain influencers in the industry that care that deeply in their gut, in their heart, to be every single day supporting our people. And I just wanted to personally, as someone who's invested in my career in this industry, thank you for that.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be recognized. recognized, and we appreciate that. But it's something that we do because we feel so strongly about the industry and how important it is. We every time that right now we're working on the nighttime entertainment committee that's dealing with the licensing of restaurants and bars and nightclubs. We were on the committees for noise. Several years ago, we had a celebrity client here in Toronto that opened up a bar, and he came from Las Vegas, and he wanted to have bottle service. And I don't know if you remember at that time, Ontario's law was you could only have 3 ounces maximum, right? 1 triple, that was it. You couldn't buy a bottle. So we tried to convince the government and the AGCO that, you know what, if you allow bottle service, the world's not going to explode. There's ways to do it properly and ways to ensure that you still maintain public safety and public security. And since bottle service was imposed and allowed and legalized in Ontario, think of how many establishments now depend on that for their livelihood. And imagine if we were still at the 3 ounce minimum, what a change would have happened. What change would have happened in the industry in terms of the ability to generate revenue from various streams?
And how far behind we would have been for no real reason, right? And we might think nightclubs with bottle service, but if it's bottomless mimosas or something like that for brunch locations, it has an impact in so many different areas. And there's just this waterfall, this solution to move regulation. And this is my opinion, not SVK's or Adam's. Regulation just got in the way, and maybe not intended. That somebody just wasn't looking at it through a lens of the solution and how we bring health to our industry. No judgment, but even all of those solutions combined have had a dramatic impact. So you're at the Restaurants Canada show. Is there anybody you're excited to visit or see outside of Mr. Jay Ashton?
I love Jay. I love the show.
What do you love about Jay? I guess the reason why Jay does this show and this fashion is so we tell Jay how much we love him, and that's how we wrap every show. But tell me a little bit about your relationship with Mr. Ashton.
Well, I owe my introduction to Jay through you, so thank you, Matt. That was very generous of you to introduce us.
I just glad that you let him in the office or from the phone call. I wasn't sure you were going to take the call, but you did, so it's good.
I've never met anybody as enthusiastic and positive about the industry as Jay. And, you know, he doesn't own a restaurant, he doesn't own a bar, he doesn't have a liquor license, but he's passionate about the industry, and our passions just seem to meld together. Like, every time we talk and we brainstorm, we come up with these fantastic ideas. And yes, and the podcast was one of them. We're sitting there thinking about it one day. We're like, what the heck? I can't believe we haven't done this. Like, what a great idea. Let's do this. And we weren't even high. We hadn't done any edibles, right? We hadn't done any.
Totally kidding.
But I am trying to get Jay started on some edibles. He's come out to a couple of conferences that I've done. Did we get you to try anything when you came out? No? Still. Well, we'll get you.
Smile says it all, Ashley. Well, next time we're at a conference, we're going to try some edibles. I'm just curious in supporting the industry. So can't wait to see where we go. Can't wait to tune in as a guest. Really excited to learn more about food infused cannabis. We're seeing some great trends with some Canadian operators down in LA. So I will be a fan and a viewer, and thank you for taking your time today, and also all the time you've invested in our industry.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me on your show, and it's a pleasure to see you after all these years. My God, how long have we known each other? 15 years?
I'm very grateful for.
And it's great to see your business thriving and your reputation growing, because you deserve it. I don't know too many people that work as hard as you and as diligent as you to make things happen and to work for the success of their clients.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Ashton, are you going to roll us?
We're out.
That was awesome.
Thanks. It did go very well. Thank you for being a great host. No, you were wonderful.